Start with the arrest of Imran Khan. What did Pakistan gain by arresting one of the most popular leaders of the country?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, there was no objective to achieve by arresting Mr. Imran Khan, and Mr. Imran Khan is not arrested by the government. It is the National Accountability Bureau, NAB, according to the law, where he's being investigated under a case of corruption of Al-Qadir Trust University. And I've heard certain call-up notices have also been sent to him to answer the NAB questions, which were not sent back. And so NAB went to Islamabad High Court, where Mr. Imran Khan was appearing, and arrested him. And later Islamabad High Court, where they challenged the arrest, also gave a verdict that it's a lawful and a legal arrest. And then it was also endorsed by the Accountability Court later, the next day probably. So it was all done through NAB, where NAB arrested him and he had to answer, which he didn't, of course. And then what happened later, we also.
So internet's been shut down, popular social media sites blockaded, the military in the streets. Does that not sound like martial law to you?
Oh, well, not really, because there's just one person who always, it's a pattern. It's not something which has happened in Pakistan by Mr. Khan and his party, which is unprecedented. There are examples of where whenever he's, for example, when he was in government and when the opposition and opposition leader used to ask questions. So the opposition with the first two rows in the parliament were in death cells in the jail. If media used to ask questions, the media was in jail and was silenced. Where of course there's a report of RSF also that Mr. Khan was called a media predator. So this was 4 years legacy. And then when Mr. Khan came into opposition, so he was now the office holder who held the office of the highest office of the chief executive of a country. So he's questioned on different corruption cases, on various cases that are under investigation in federal investigation agencies and also in NAB, which he has to answer. So there's a pattern that happened in last 14 months. You remember this famous case of Zaman Park, when the police took warrants by the court to Mr. Khan, and how he resorted to violence, and then human shields, women and children were used to protect him. They were outside Zaman Park and they were petrol bombs. Police was welcomed by petrol bombs, in fact, outside Zaman Park. Then 25th May, when he announced the Long March, and with the same pattern, same violence, inciting violence, calls to the workers to come out on streets, and the bridges were broken, were attacked, the buildings were attacked, the metro stations were attacked, the metros itself, they were attacked. So there's a complete mindset and a pattern, and it's the continuity of that. And when the other day, then of course one case where judicial complex was attacked, when a judge called him under an investigation trial of a case as well, that also a corruption case. Same happened, no camera was, everything was broken, the doors, the windows, the cameras of the judicial complex. And he entered with mob, with Kalashnikovs, with petrol bombs in a judicial complex. So there's a continuity that whenever he's asked a question or whenever he's called on an investigation, so this is how he resorts to violence, incite violence. And then there is that day when he was in the court, the NAB arrested Mr. Khan. The same happened in the country for 3 days, and it's just one person.
But I'm talking about your government's decisions. Yeah. You blockaded the internet.
Yeah.
You shut down.
What do you expect? What do you expect?
Called in the military.
What do you expect when a party leader is inciting violence on streets, calling out people, has installed? There was no political reaction to his arrest, because if there was a political reaction to his arrest, then we could have seen the streets filled with people outside there. There were different installations where he placed people, and then he was monitoring. The entire party leadership was monitoring that how many people have reached Jinnah House and Corps Commander House in Lahore, how many people have reached metro bridges, and then there was entire monitoring done. So what do you expect by the government, who has to save the people, the citizens, the government who has to save the patients who they threw out of ambulances, and the ambulances were attacked, the schools were attacked, the hospitals were attacked, the animal market was attacked. So what do you expect from the
But
government?
does this not show that
Because
the
they were
government-
not stopping also.
But that's the thing, that the government tried and they could not stop it. Does
No,
it
these
not
are-
show
no,
that the government failed
I think
to
these,
save all of
no,
these
I think the
locations
government
and
very
sites?
prudently, very maturely, the police showed a responsible restraint to stop violence in the country, incitement of violence in the country, and these are the tools which the government sort of took help from. And then now we see there's peace around. Everything is in its place because Mr. Khan has not answered the corruption case, and he's out of jail in 48 hours.
Well, there's peace now because the court has released him.
Who was on physical remand,
And you've
that has
opened the
never
internet.
happened in the legal history of the country.
So what happens next? Because it feels that the government, all of the security agencies of Pakistan, they tried their best to keep him in jail. He's still not in jail, and as soon as he comes out, the situation comes back to normal. So obviously there was a miscalculation on the part of the government or the security agencies. So who's calling the shots and what happens next?
No, there's no miscalculation at all on government's behalf or the security agencies' behalf. We had the force which we didn't used against the citizens. We dealt with it very maturely because we knew it's just one person inciting violence and who has this mindset and a pattern of doing things and resorting to violence, as I said before. So, when you say that what is the, what's next for the government, right? So government is, as you say, the state. The state is not just government, it's not just the executive. It is the executive, the judiciary and the parliament. And if one pillar of the state tries to enforce law and order in the country and maintain law and order in the country, and the second pillar, equally important, equally powerful, does otherwise and facilitates and enables an environment where such activities are carried out across the country and ignores it and invites the person with allegation of 60 billion of corruption to the Supreme Court and say, it is really good to see you, Mr. Khan.
Well, if you've been looking at Pakistan for the last 5-6 years, it appears that now the shoe's on the other foot. Nawaz Sharif, your party leader, was making similar allegations against the military, the chief of army staff, the chief of the intelligence, what Imran Khan is doing now. So if this is a pattern where each politician, where they're in government, they say they're on the same page with the military establishment. The moment they join the opposition, they say they're being persecuted by the same military. Obviously, the politicians need to have a little soul searching, don't they?
Well, not. I will humbly disagree with you because I think there are two different examples. And why I say that? There are two different cases. Because Mr. Nawaz Sharif, when he was the Prime Minister and Mr. Bajwa was the Chief of Army Staff, he called out Mr. Bajwa and his ingress and his interference into politics and democracy of the country.
What Imran Khan is doing
No,
now to the current
let me
chief.
finish, please. And when Mr. Nawaz Sharif was ousted, and when he traveled from Islamabad to Lahore, how many ambulances were set on fire? How many military installations were set on fire? How many metros and motorways were set on fire? How many hospitals and schools were set on fire? None. Because Mr. Nawaz Sharif, the three-time Prime Minister, had a case. And he called out Chief of Army Staff and his interference, and each one of them who were interfering into democratic process then, right? Now, here's a person who was offering Chief of Army Staff, Mr. Bajwa, lifetime extension in a closed door, and also was meeting Mr. Bajwa in President House just to invite him to interfere and interfere into vote of no confidence against Mr. Khan. So Mr. Khan had no problem with Chief of Army Staff when he was there, right, Mr. Bajwa. And then when he did not listen to Mr. Khan's request, he was called out by Mr. Khan because he had lost power and he was here. Now, why is he calling out Chief of Army Staff? Because Chief of Army Staff, current Chief of Army Staff, is not willing to sit with Mr. Khan in the room and interfere into the democratic processes of the country. And additionally, Chief of Army Staff, who's now the Chief of Army Staff, was then the DGISI of Mr. Khan, who went to Mr. Khan, appointed by Mr. Khan, went to him and said that, look, there are people in your government, your wife, her friend and your ministers are involved into corruption, and these are the evidences. He was removed from DGISI, and now Mr. Khan knows that the current Chief of Army Staff knows about his corruption and has the evidences, and he thinks that he's playing his role and he's doing something which is hand in glove with the government and giving the evidence to the government to file cases against Mr. Khan, which is in contradiction to what is there, because if the government had the intention to do political victimization, which Mr. Khan was doing, because all these false allegations and corruption cases against us were made in the Prime Minister office.
You've got 100 cases registered
and today Mr. Khan says, I didn't say they were corrupt. It was Bajwa who used to say they were corrupt, and that's why there were cases against him. Wow. And today, Mr. Khan is not ready to answer his corruption allegations.
100 cases registered against Imran Khan does sound like political vendetta, doesn't it?
100 cases, so that's Mr. Khan's mantra, false mantra, which he always says, and he always indulge into such narrative also. Mr. Khan, prominent cases against him, which I am privy of, which he's not ready to answer. One, foreign funding by the Election Commission, not by the government. The 60 billion Al-Qaeda Trust, not by the government. National Accountability Bureau. The Toshakhana by federal investigation agencies and NAB, that are now the references are in the courts, where Mr. Khan is not ready to answer. And the fourth one is the Terrian case, which is again in the Islamabad High Court, not with the government. So this perception that Mr. Khan is trying to develop, that the government is against him and doing political settling some political vendetta or some political victimization, is false, because if we wanted that, we wouldn't have waited for 14 months. We could have just, on that cipher thing, the joke that he was moving around with, he would have been behind the bars. There was a Supreme Court order also. Then the government has the force and the government has the authority to arrest, which Mr. Khan has been misusing against his opposition.
I've been talking to people on the streets. It appears that the heart of all of this crisis is the elections, which your party was asking Mr. Khan to go for. He should dissolve the assemblies within 90 days according to the constitution. There will be elections, and now he's asking you, and people agree on the street, that why is the government running away from elections? Hold it within 90 days.
Who is he? Mr. Khan? Mr. Khan, who dissolved the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa assembly and Punjab assembly on the orders of Mr. Bajwa, according to him, who not just dissolved it, but then, because the Chief Minister categorically on television said that I never wanted to dissolve the Punjab Assembly, Mr. Pervez Elahi, right? And Mr. Khan, when he's not in power, he wants that the elections would happen when he wants. No. There's a constitution, there's a law that will of course take its own course, and elections will happen after we complete the constitutional tenure that's there in the law of Election Commission and Election Law 2017.
It appears that Pakistan is going towards another season of political uncertainty, where you're not just facing a political enemy, but you're at loggerheads with this highest court of the country. Your ruling alliance says that this is the death of justice in Pakistan, where the court has given reprieve to somebody who went to the court, whereas if you in power were at that point went to court, you would have gotten the same reprieve, wouldn't you?
No, this wasn't the case. In last 4 years, when we were jailed on false cases, our hearing was never heard in the court for a year, for 8 months, for 6 months, and I've been, there myself. I'm witness to all this saga, which was there for last 4 years. And Mr. Khan did not go to the court. Mr. Khan was invited to the court in Masadi, sent by the Supreme Court. And Mr. Khan, when went there, he was on physical remand, and the Supreme Court gave him bail and said they're really happy to see him, and then wished him good luck, and then under their custody sent him to police line guest house with 10 people to have chat with, and then sleep, and then appear in the court the next day in Islamabad High Court. Islamabad High Court, under the influence of Supreme Court, gave bundle bails of all the existing cases against him. He can't be arrested in any other case. In any new investigation, the existing cases are all shut down, given bails. Where does this happen? You give me, if you compare that with civil governments, organizations, countries, wherever around the world, the global commonality, if we draw, this does not happen in any part of the world. Never. And if Supreme Court, and I won't say Supreme Court or judiciary, I want to clearly draw differentiation between an institution and individuals. So there are individuals who we have questions, and there is a general perception in the society that there are factions in the Supreme Court. There is a section of the Supreme Court that's favoring Mr. Imran Khan for maybe personal reasons or for professional reasons. And that's the perception that legal community is talking about, the legal fraternity is talking about, the legal experts are talking about, not just the government allies.
Well, now that we're on perceptions, your government has been in charge of Pakistan for over a year. The economy is in really terrible shape. Pakistan is on the verge of default. Security situation has become worse. You're at loggerheads with the country's court, and there seems to be political instability. So this is the reason that the government right now wants to move away from elections and gain as much time as possible so that they can mend at least some of these areas?
Well, as I said, first of all, answering to your question, the government is not, we can also rephrase it. I would like to rephrase it. The Supreme Court maybe is, the individuals in the Supreme Court maybe are loggerhead with the executive, and also with the constitution and law and order, in the country, number one. Number two, I think what you said is very important. It's been a year, yes, but what about the 4 years of economic, I would say, what has happened to the economy of the country in the last 4 years during Mr. Khan's tenure is unprecedented also. Because in 2018, when we who are in government for last 1 year, when we left the government, the country was growing at 6.1% of GDP. There was a lowest historic inflation of 2.6% in the country. The debt which Mr. Khan, historic debt, historic in last 4 years, we're dealing with that also. And the IMF program was rolled out, was completed in 2015. CPEC was there, employment was there, development was there, schools were built, universities were built, foreign policy was great because CPEC was there, lots of projects with neighboring countries, with the regional countries were in place. And when we left, the economy, as I said, was growing at 6.1%. So what Mr. Khan inherited, we did not inherit that. And what we inherited was the highest historic inflation, which was at 16%. We inherited a defaulting country at the verge of default, which we saved. Mr. Khan signed an agreement with IMF, violated it, all the agreement conditions violated, and when we came into power, the IMF program was suspended. We are renegotiating it, and the credibility of the country which Mr. Khan had put the country to, the risk of default, we saved it, and we are negotiating with IMF because the credibility of the country is at risk with IMF also. And then Mr. Khan, whose legacy of economic destruction we inherited, is doing the same. When we were bringing CPEC, Mr. Nawaz Sharif was bringing CPEC to the country, he was at D-Chalk. And today also, when we're fixing his economic legacy and destruction, what he's doing, resorting to violence and inciting violence in the country. The political instability is because of Mr. Khan. And we, as responsible political parties, the coalition government, again with majority, with responsible restraint, are dealing with Mr. Khan.
Final 30 seconds. What happens when you go in front of the Supreme Court and there's a massive protest? It appears that the Supreme Court is going to question why elections have not been held in this country and could go for possible disqualification.
No, who's not, good question, who's not saying that elections are not happening in the country. The elections will happen after completing the constitutional tenure, which is enshrined in the constitution, and also election law of the country, number one. Number two, we are political parties. We have the right to protest, and there are, our workers are, disgruntled. They're angry to the, this bias of Supreme Court towards Mr. Khan, and this is a general perception that Mr. Khan is being favored by individuals in the Supreme Court. So our workers are there. We'll lodge our protest, and we will not set the buildings to fire. We'll protect them. It will be a peaceful protest to lodge our protest against the constitutional violations that are happening in the country.
Finally, What is the
you
solution?
said 30 seconds.
I know. Well,
Okay.
I've got
Okay,
one
okay.
last one. What happens to Pakistan now? It seems that Pakistan, as its existence, is being questioned, unlike it has ever been before. The military establishment, unprecedented scenes, is being questioned. The economy is in a really deep shock. The country's prognosis when it comes to political stability looks to be in terrible state. So you, as politicians who are running Pakistan and probably want to win the next elections, how are you going to solve these problems?
First of all, I think Pakistan is in safe hands. We have dealt with such economic conditions always when Mr. Nawaz Sharif comes into power. We dealt with it recently in 2013 also. We have the experience, the intention, and we have the will to put the country back on economic path and development path. We are busy doing that. And Mr. Khan, as I said, that it's not Pakistan that's under such condition, it's just only one person who's a fascist, who believes in violence, who incite violence, and we know how to deal with that.
Madam Marriyum Aurangzeb, with the Information Minister of Pakistan, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much.